on this. Can you believe how mean Tom's being?
When I first saw it, I thought, you know what? If anyone has the equity in the league, obviously not on the team yet, but in the league, to chew out his teammates publicly, it's Tom Brady. It's what a quarterback has to do sometimes, and a competitor and the GOAT and all that stuff. And he used to do that on the Patriots, too. He'd be demonstrative towards receivers. If they, he'd throw the ball. He'd throw, not an interception that often, but there would be some miscommunication on play. He'd be pointing to his receiver, and I'm like, he's kind of calling out his receiver publicly. Like, okay, but that's how he does. And you know who can get away with that? Players who don't make mental errors. I understand that. They used to say this about, like, Joe DiMaggio, right? Like, he never made a mental error in a game. And that's Tom Brady. So I'm not setting it up for the punchline here, guys. I'm being honest. I'm like, I guess Brady can do that because that's a competitor and he doesn't make mental errors. And the fact is he's not chewing his guys out for lack of pass protection there, which was shoddy at times because, hey, Tom Brady, I thought you got rid of the ball in record time and everything. I thought that was what you do. No, it was mental errors the offensive line was making. They were doing the moonwalk the wrong way down the field. It was a rally killer, as he said later. So that's all legit. But, brother, if you do it like that in front of the whole world, you're chewing out your O-line for the mental errors. I don't think you're allowed at that point to think it's third down when it's fourth down with the game on the line. It's such a bad look. It takes moxie to go out like when people make predictions, guarantee wins and everything. The reason that takes moxie is you might lose, but damn, he must be confident in his own ability to avoid those mistakes, to do stuff like that. But so it was an especially bad look for a 43-year-old quarterback, first year on a new team, chewing out his O-line, the guys who are paid to protect him for mental errors, and then making one of the all-time gaffes certainly of his career, but that we can remember at the end of the game.
It's a bad look, but no one really cares. If the criteria to be able to yell at people is that you can never make any mental mistakes, then no one can ever yell at anyone in the history of life. Like Tom Brady, the interception in week 1 was because he misread a coverage to Mike Evans. But I do think that Tom Brady and anyone who's a leader of an organization, a family, a leader of anything, like you have to understand that there are multiple ways to lead and different people respond to things differently. I don't know that Tom Brady knows exactly how to deal with the guys on his team right now, but I'm not going to have a fit about him yelling at some players in that situation, and I'm not going to blame him because, well, he does deserve blame for not being able to count to 4 necessarily, but I'm not going to say you can't yell at people because you also can't count to 4. Tom Brady, you're right. He's built up enough equity to get to the point now where he gets to do these sorts of things, and Bruce Arians said this, we're not zooming in and replaying and having first take debates about when he's patting them on the back also. There are many different ways to lead. I wrote a cover story for ESPN that's coming out tomorrow about Tyrann Mathieu, and in talking to him, one of the things that he said about his leadership, the most important thing to it, is sensitivity. And that's not what you expect out of a fearsome safety like that, but just making the point, there's many different ways to lead, and if Tom Brady, one of the tools in his tool belt is screaming at people publicly, maybe that works. They better protect him, because if he upsets them, and they decide that they're not going to focus or they're not going to do the job as well as they could, he has a big price to pay, which is why I think sometimes it's okay, particularly for a quarterback, to yell at an offensive lineman, because your mental mistake means broken bones for me.
Yeah, when you look at Tom Brady, right, you talked about the equity, Max. Who has more equity in this league when it comes to guys like Tom Brady? And so if he's on the sideline and he's upset with the offensive line, there's a reason. If he's upset with the wide receivers, there's a reason. And also what you understand is those are young players, right? Tristan Wirfs is going to look at Tom Brady and say, you know what? I have to be better. Ryan Jensen, who seems to get an unsportsmanlike penalty every week, knows that he has to be better. And when you're playing a tightly contested game and you are moving backwards and you hear the beep, 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 because you're going backwards because of penalties, then you know that Tom Brady's going to be upset. But let's not act like this is the first time we've seen him behave this way. I believe this has been an argument for much of Tom Brady's career when guys want to say positive things about people like Cam Newton and his attitude on the sideline, or other quarterbacks who behave in certain ways, and we critique them differently than we have with Tom Brady. When it was Bill O'Brien and Tom Brady and those guys had to be separated, then nothing was said. When we see Tom Brady Brady last year against the Houston Texans berating one of his wide receivers because the route isn't where it's supposed to be. We say, but that's Tom Brady. And so we're used to this. And now, I agree with Max in this. If you're going to say and behave certain ways, it's best if you don't make a mistake. But then you listen to Domonique and you know if you played the game long enough and you're in certain situations, it's not going to be perfection. And that's what we got from Tom Brady. But there isn't people in those locker rooms. There aren't offensive linemen in that locker room saying, you know what? The next time Tom scream at me, all I'm going to do is this. You know what I mean? Like, nobody's saying those things because more than 4 or not knowing his 4th down, he knows 6, and that's 6 rings. And those players respect him. His coach respects him. And if anybody does a ton of cussing, it's Bruce Arians. So those players are used to it, and they understand that Tom Brady's trying to get them to the promised land, and those simple mistakes are things that can keep them from getting there.
I understand that, and that's why when he did it, it's like I thought, okay, good, he's lead. This is what he does. I mean, if the greatest who ever did it this way, then maybe that's the way to do it, right? What I'm talking about is not that he's chewing out his teammates, and when I see him chewing out teammates, I always assume it's a mental error, right? Because sometimes in the physical execution, a guy just outperforms you or it's not perfect. But what he was clearly, to my mind, and later he corroborated this, upset about were the mental errors, the penalties. They were drive killers, and you could understand why a guy would get that upset. But when you're with a new team, I understand everything you've done in the NFL elsewhere, but you've only played a handful of games with this team, and you're chewing out your O-line for specifically mental errors. And then at the end of the game, remember what we were all saying? Nagy blew this. He gave Tom Brady over a minute to go with all these offensive weapons. You know, here come the Bucs. They're going to win the game now. And in fact, that's not only not what happened, because they were tough throws on third and fourth down.
I have a question.
Although Nick Foles made a tough throw to get him in field goal range. Not only is that not what happened, but he forgets the downs.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.